You have only one Metalenz to do this job. That's it. And you can fabricate them, you can mass produce them with the same technology as the chip. What I'm saying is game-changing.
This is Deep, the show about the emerging deep technology that will change the world. Today I'm chatting with Federico Capasso, professor of applied physics at Harvard University. He's the former head of physical research at Bell Labs and an expert on using nanostructures to focus light, simplify lens systems, and optimize 3D depth sensing. Federico is also a co-founder and board member of Metalenz, a startup that is leveraging his research to mass-produce precise lenses using, surprisingly, semiconductor manufacturing technology. Federico first became famous as one of the inventors of quantum cascade lasers, which became an industry standard for chemical sensing. So why will the combination of optics and nanotechnology change the way we build smartphones, medical imaging tools, augmented reality glasses, and even automotive systems? How is the use of existing semiconductor foundries a potential economic and supply chain game changer? This is Ben Kaplan with Deep Venture Partners. As always, our email is deepshow@deepvp.com. Let's go deep. Thanks to Federico Capasso for joining us on the show. What is the sort of promise of these metastructures as a way to sort of mass produce lenses that can have more precision and capabilities than the typical way that, say, consumer electronics lenses would be manufactured?
Well, I mean, what you can do is using the standard techniques that you use to produce computer chips. Technical name is integrated circuits. You can fabricate these arrays of, we call them metaatoms. Metaatoms are really nanostructures of materials such as glass, silicon, you actually name it, okay? Lots of different materials. So you can shape an array of these metaatoms that are typically spaced by a distance quite a bit less than the wavelength of light. Typical wavelength of light in the green is 500 nanometers. 1 nanometers is 1 billionth of a meter. So we are talking of separation between these elements that are typically in, 100 nanometer scale or actually less. Now, when you do this material acquires very interesting properties. In a sense, the properties come from the fact that you have a collective behavior. So you can use this collective behavior to shape light. Shape light meaning that if light is incident on one of these structures that we call metasurfaces, it can focus light. In this case, you have a Metalenz. And typically, if you want to shape light with a conventional lens, in fact, let's take our cell phone here, my cell phones, okay? There are many lenses here. All these are curved lenses.
Usually made after plastic.
Plastic was the big revolution in moving applications to high volume. Substituting lenses of glass with lenses of plastics was a huge thing. So cell phones have and iPads have plastic lenses. And still, if you look at these lenses, they are curved. And typically when we say a lens, you actually are talking of multiple lenses. Typically like the camera for face recognition, you have 4 plastic lenses. When you unlock your phone, what you are using is actually there is a lens that looks at your face, okay? And but it's not a lens, it is an object. If you look at the lenses are quite complex. A lens is actually 4 plastic lenses, which means different materials, somewhat different shape, they're all curved, and then you have to align them perfectly on top of each other. In the case of the Metalenz solution, for that is a dramatic simplification. you have only one Metalens to do this job, and you have an aperture in front. Okay, that's it. Okay, so and you can fabricate them, you can mass produce them with the same technology as the chip. You see, the cell phones have two technologies. They have the semiconductor technology for the silicon chip, right? The camera sensor. And then you have plastics for the optics, right? What I'm saying is game changing. And I realized that, in fact, a few years ago in doing a paper with one of my students. In fact, we put the word mass production in the title of this paper, that, now with a single technology, you can fabricate both the chip and the Metalenz. And that's really huge.
Which makes a difference in supply chain then, because some of these foundries, you could do both key parts of the phone at the same place.
Exactly right. There are companies that specialize in putting together this camera module. The camera module there is a sensor, and on top there is the 4 lenses, That's not an easy thing. They are specialized companies. We are really talking about bypassing, these some of these steps, So it is very significant. I mean,
consider the application of these lenses to next-generation augmented reality glasses. Traditional AR devices rely on bulky multi-lens systems to project images and capture surroundings. But ultra-thin, flat optics could make AR glasses significantly lighter and smaller, making them wearable for longer periods. Sharper image projection? Check. Better depth sensing? Yep. More accurate and clear virtual overlays? Absolutely. This could revolutionize industries like education, healthcare, and remote work, enabling immersive training simulations, real-time imaging, and seamless collaboration with lifelike holograms.
VR is not a big business yet, but I think it's going to become. AR stands for augmented reality, as you know, VR for virtual reality. So I think there really it can have a lot of inroads. But then there is also the market, for example, for medical imaging. We worked with Mass General Hospital, with the team at Mass General Hospital to demonstrate a Metalenz. Essentially, the idea is this group wanted to, Professor Melissa Suter wanted to image the bronchial tumor. Basically, you use this lens to image, like, for example, it is mounted at the end of an optical fiber, and you use it kind of like a periscope, like when you do an endoscopy. Similar idea, basically. And the Metalenses, they were interested in imaging the bronchial tumor in its early stages. In its early stages, the actual size is sub-wavelength. But with conventional lenses they could purchase on the market, they didn't have sufficient resolution. So when they replaced it with our Metalenz, they were able to image the bronchial tumor in animals, at the very beginning of when it was barely visible. So I think in medical imaging, there are definitely, and let me say that a lens never focuses. If you take a lens that you buy, it never focuses to a precise spot. Fundamentally, the smallest spot that you can focus light, it's of the order of half the wavelength, right? So it is, if you like, a circle of diameter half the wavelengths. Now, in reality, lenses have aberrations, meaning they distort light in such a way that it's not easy to see this ultimate limit. This limit is called the diffraction limit. It's a technical term that just simply say the spot size is approximately equal to half wavelengths. That's not easy to do that. If you want to do this with conventional lenses, you have to shape them in a certain precise way, okay? And then there are other type of distortions. Okay, so so in general, you have to correct these lenses. You shape them in a certain way, or in reality, you use not one lens, but multiple lenses to do these corrections. For example, if you want to focus all the colors in the same spot, this is called achromatic lens. You need to have multiple lenses. That's why microscope objectives have not a single lens. Okay, there are multiple lenses.
So these meta lenses, one of the benefits is to simplify the system. The need for all of these different lenses to correct it.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to do some correction by design. But for example, this was the early successes that we designed and demonstrated a Metalenz that focused precisely down to half of the wavelengths of light. And it was done by simply arranging these pillars, these meta atoms. I'm sure you've seen pictures of this. They're all over now the internet, okay? In such a way that you could produce a spot. No, these are flat structures. They are macroscopically flat. Of course, locally you have these pillars. These pillars are all the same height, but basically it is a planar structure. You see, the success of electronics is it's called planar technology. Okay, everything happens basically on a plane. So here the optics is simplified in the fabrication, and like focusing this big result we had a few years ago. If you want to focus all the colors in a spot, you have to have, if you use refractive lenses are the one that use the conventional law of refraction, which is called Snell law. You have a curve, they are curved. But if you want to focus all the colors, you have to use multiple lenses. There is no way around it. It's a fundamental thing. You cannot do with standard optics focusing all the colors in the same spot. Where with meta optics, we have shown a single lens can focus all the colors of visible light, let's say, in the same spot with the same focal distance, with the same distance. And that's huge. I mean, this is something that it's technology, but it's a fundamental new result. And
one, we're simplifying the system of sort of like multiple corrective lenses. Two, we're enabling, more advanced sensing or focusing of light or sensing. And then three, we're consolidating the supply chain just because of the basically using existing semiconductor equipment. So all of the consumer electronics that would essentially make a camera and need computer chips could be done potentially together.
I can tell you there is a telling sign. When I started this company with Rob Devlin, who is now the CEO. He was one of my graduate students, okay? And the interesting thing, we wanted to have not only the VCs to fund us, but some of the strategic investors. So we have Intel, the main makers of,
Sure, Intel Inside, yes.
Applied Materials. Applied Materials makes all of the equipment that the foundries use for semiconductor processing, right? And then we had ST Micro Electronics, that is one of the giant companies, semiconductor companies, that markets semiconductor technologies. So we wanted to have the strategic investors in so they could see directly, even though that's the business arm, the strategic investors. Still, we wanted to have them early on into this startup company.
And one of the things that I do a lot with my work at Deep Venture Partners is look at technology that is sort of trapped in academia that could come out and be, commercialized better. What was the success of sort of getting this technology, which was obviously in your lab, turning it into a company like Metalenz, bringing on strategic investors? What do you credit to that? Lots of I think academics struggle on the business side to commercialize something.
When I arrived at Harvard, I would say Harvard was behind in this area in the ability to, we call it translation, basically, translate the academic research into some business. It was way behind. And of course, in some sectors like the biomedical, it had a quite success, but it was certainly behind MIT and so forth. So then Harvard made the right choice to hire a head of the Office of Technology Development, who was an Israeli venture capitalist, and he turned around the organization in a dramatic way, and they have been extremely helpful to us in establishing contacts and so forth, okay? I think also the vision is important. At some point when we managed to, in the first project, to make lithographically, you heard the term, the technology by which you make chips is called lithography. You basically print your circuit on an actual chip. That's what it is, right? I mean, when we succeeded in making this Metalenz with this technology, we wrote a paper where we clearly pointed out that this probably will become game changers for the reason that I said before. If you now can make not only the electronics, but the optics with basically the same technology, semiconductor fabrication technology, that will have a huge impact. And I think the signs now are pretty obvious. Everyone tries to jump on the bandwagon. I come from Bell Labs, where I spent 25 years at Bell Telephone Labs. So I came for a culture of filing patents. I had already 50, 60 patents before coming to Harvard. And then, so every time we invent something that we think is potentially significant, we don't patent everything. It's a waste of money, that the attorneys cost a lot of money. The fact that I'm not paying it's the university is still money. So I'm very conscientious. I have quite a high bar for filing patents. It really I need to see some potential. And so when we started to make these metasurfaces, we started to file patents. So, a patent does not protect you 100%, but certainly we have very strong protection from our patents. So far, you never know. We haven't really been challenged,
And did you consider bringing on outside business people who knew the industry?
Oh, yes. Metalenz. I am on the board of Metalenz, but I don't have a direct role in running it. Absolutely, Metalenz has hired people with experience and so forth. And there is a board that it's a lot of people from industries, some VCs, right? There is a board of observers also. So in generally, I think we had early on the correct vision. We could have, like other people have done, focus on, for example, we could have started a company on medical, but I said, the scientific market, but compared to consumer electronics market, those are niches. You know what I mean? But let me tell you something a bit about the culture of my group. I come from the culture of Bell Labs, so research is very important. In fact, when my graduate student, he was sort of impatient to join Metalenz. He was sort of working part-time. I sent him a clear message that says, not only you have to finish your PhD, otherwise I'm not going to let you go. You have to finish a key paper that eventually he published in Natural Science. After that, you actually can go. The fountain of youth is always the science behind it. Let's not forget. A lot of people that just want to make money, they forget that without science, we would have nothing of what we have today. We wouldn't have someone has to say it. Scientists do not say it loud enough. And we have to tell everyone That's the fundamental stuff. Without that understanding, without Maxwell's equation in the 1816, none of the present world that we have will actually be here. Come on, all the understanding of electricity and magnetism. And this continues. So I'm always stressed the importance of doing science. Once we do the science well, we should look for applications because I think it's important. That's where the Bell Labs culture was in. Even though we had in research, we had all the freedom that we needed, there was a strong encouragement when we saw potential, not to start a company, but because at that time, Bell Labs was part of companies that were, first they had the electronic, had the microelectronics, then that was, shipped out, it ended. But so there was this very fruitful culture that the science can inspire new technology. And also there is the other part that sometimes an important technology, the development can lead to actual new science.
When you think about applications, I mean, I think one of the sometimes challenges coming from academia that's sometimes brought up is that, you develop a technology, you develop the science, as you've said, which is incredibly important. And then really you look for applications for it, but it's not rooted in like the customer problem. It's not rooted in the, we're making an iPad or we're making an iPhone or what that problem is.
So look, first of all, this is the second company that I started, In fact, my early work for which I may say that I became famous was the work on the quantum cascade laser that has nothing to do with Metasurfaces completely. But that taught me a lot of things, when I realized this laser could be used for chemical sensing. I was at Bell Labs and I organized an actual meeting inside Bell Labs where I invited a lot of people from companies to tell us, what are the important areas in chemical sensing. And then when I joined Harvard, I started a company called EOS for photonics to develop arrays of these quantum cascade laser for chemical sensing. And then this merged with an exciting company called Pender Technologies. The CEO is a guy from Iran, extraordinarily bright. He was a colleague at Bell Labs, Dariush Vakshuri. And so now it's part of this company. But again, so I learned then is this, this is stuff I'm constantly, I read also, I'm interested in reading what the business people say, I read publications where you can sort of understand. For example, there is IEEE Spectrum, right? There are a lot of publications out there that tells you what's the situation for the business. So you start to know who the players are in actual optics, And in fact, in the early phase of Metalenz, we looked at also other application, but we did not want to become a company that just provides parts that people can buy. We wanted to create new solutions. You know what I mean? Besides that, it's much more profitable. That you understand very well, right? And right now, and if you look at the Metalenz website, it says it's very clear. The Metalenz is there to provide new solutions to actual sensing in a broad sense. You can have depth sensing. You can have a lot of. You can have stuff that wearable type of optics. The field of wearable optics is we are just scratching the surface. In a sense, the VR market is small. I mean, I don't know how many users there are worldwide, but they are not even close to 1 billion. They might be conservative. They might be exaggerating a bit. There might be 100 million users of VR. I don't believe there are 100 million. They're probably in the tens of millions. So that could be expanded a lot. So I have learned over the years to pay attention also to the business side of things, the opportunity for applications, right? And they're not obvious, sometimes in finding the right application. Once you find it, it all becomes obvious. It's an old story.
And also with the increase in, for instance, like 6G technology and the increase in data rates, the reduction in latency, the ability for the transmission of holographic images and more, we're going to have more of a demand for lenses.
Now, and in fact, I'm certain you mentioned communication. And before I forget, this is very important. 4 years ago, and this sort of illustrates what has been my attitude. Corning, they invited me to give a talk there. Corning, and there are various locations. This is Corning in Corning, New York. The town is called Corning in New York State. And they invited me to give a talk on Metasurface, and they started to get interested because my sense is, Corning, that is, it's a great hardware company. They had always, they pivoted from making fibers to making displays, glass for displays when there was the telecom bust, and that saved them. It saved them because they had kept their core competencies. They didn't, as the head of research told me, other companies simply fired everyone. Said, no, we are not going to fire everyone. Okay, we're going to keep our competencies. So they pivoted literally. When the stocks dropped, you are probably too young to remember, but I remember when the Lucent stock within a few days dropped from $90 a share to $7 a share, and it stayed there forever. Many companies just they went bust. Not Corning. So I talked to the engineers at Corning there, and then they organized a symposium on Metasurfaces, and then they started to fund me with an actual gift. Then they were happy, and now we are in the 4th year of a contract. And I believe this is going to have impact. The idea is, you heard, the fiber capacity was saturating already. I remember when I left in the late 90s, the telecom bust, the saturation of bandwidth. There was enough bandwidth with using so-called wavelength division multiplexing. You probably heard this term, right? Where you have a fiber where you put many wavelengths on. Each wavelength you can modulate at 10 gigabits. So if you have 10 wavelengths, you have 400 gigabit. If you have 100 wavelengths, you have 4 terabit. It's as simple as that. But there's only so much you can go. Now there is more hunger for bandwidth, so people are talking about using spatial division multiplexing. Okay? It means, for example, that you have a fiber which has multiple cores, multi-core fibers, right? So now the input, you have all these single mode fibers coming in, that carry phone calls, whatever, a lot of bandwidth, but still. And now you are trying to multiplex. Let's say you have 20 single mode fiber and you want to send them into the core, or many more fiber. You want to multiplex different channels into the cores, into the multi-cores of a fiber. So we invented for that a device. In fact, it was joint work with Corning, which is called a mode multiplexer. Okay, and it is a Metasurface that is very complex. We published last year, and I believe, and Corning believes too, that this type of technology, while there is not yet a business around it, in the future could well have an impact for high-capacity communication. These are high-capacity fibers, server farm. In server farms, you have this huge storage, and you have to move information at very high data rates, let's say, across distances or maybe a mile or 1 kilometer. This is not long-distance communication. So there is a lot of need for bandwidth now, and probably spatial division multiplexing is a solution. And so these Metasurfaces can have an impact also in communication.
And what is it about your background, the culture of your lab, the group that allows you to kind of be flexible in what you explore? As you mentioned, you were doing lasers before, and now you're doing optics now. What gives you that flexibility?
Well, this is very interesting that you say that. Look, what we have to realize is something, I want to train top students that when they do the PhD with me, they're able not just to continue what they were doing before, what's the point, but they are able to tackle almost any problem in applied physics. Now, there is a sort of a good reasons for that. Look, science is just one. The laws of physics, they apply in across so many disciplines, Now, it is true that there are not too many people that are able to do that. Okay, I sort of learned this at Bell Labs. There was an extraordinary place. Extraordinary not only because of the high level of people, but because also the culture is, I'm talking research even, you could carve your own niche and work on it for a number of years, maybe up to 10 years. But at some point, someone would tap you on the shoulder. And if you were not, most people, quite a few people were encouraged to change fields. There was an encouragement to change fields. That is not the academic culture in general. The academic culture everywhere is, if a professor is successful, look, they get funding, they get invited, they win prizes. Why bother to change fields? What's the incentive? Some people are doing it. I'm still doing it now. I started Metasurfaces. I really pivoted, but I come from this culture, and I think it's important because it's so easy if you are successful to just continue and coast along. People know you, they fund you. When I had to switch fields, basically from quantum cascade lasers, I still continue them a bit, but more on the side. I had to reach out for actually funding in an area that I was not known. So this is not easy to do, but I think this is a very ultimately, if we believe in the unity of science, we should be able to train the students also when I teach in a way that they don't. What I tell people is, the division of knowledge in chemistry, physics, biology is an artificial division, and in many subdisciplines, because we have to teach it, and so we have to write books, we have to organize. But I say it in a colorful way. Nature does not know what astrophysics is, what biology is. These are just labels, like at the supermarket, because if you have to find information, you better know that this under this bins. But behind there is a fundamental unity that all the fields talk to each other, and you can see it more and more right now. The research is far more interdisciplinary than it was 20 years ago. And it's important to give to young people this culture. It'll be good for their career as well, particularly if they go to industry. In industry, there is far more the opportunity to change areas.
Well, and so it almost seems to me, and I think it parallels the world of entrepreneurship and startups and business, but even in academics, there is an entrepreneurial mindset that says you can try things, you can experiment, you can do more risk taking. Just because you're sort of comfortable in where you are doesn't mean you might not challenge your comfort zone. And now it seems like because of the rise of AI and machine learning and deep learning and all of these models, it's like the convergence between fields is more striking than ever. And even the divide between life sciences and physical sciences isn't so strict anymore, it seems like to me.
Oh yeah, biology has used so many of the advances in optics. It's really striking. In fact, I have started a project with a Professor Johan Paulson at the Harvard Medical School. Interesting, he's a theoretical physicist that has pivoted to doing experimental biology. So it's quite a change to study with our meta-optics, study cells, and because we want to try to understand a big problem is antibiotic resistance, and so he has a big project and asked my help. So we hire a joint postdoc to work in this area. So even though I'm 75, I'm still looking for new opportunities now, because, if you stop, if you slow down, it's not you slow down, the only way not to go backwards is actually to go forward.
Sure.
So I'm constantly pressing my people, because there is the risk. We all have our comfort zone, but I think as leaders, it's our duty at some point to push people, not always beyond their comfort zone.
One aspect of scientific research often overlooked is research culture. At Deep Venture Partners, we're big proponents of the entrepreneurial mindset for academics and scientists, the willingness to conduct experimental research rather than just sticking to the safest path. But how do you encourage this entrepreneurial mindset in a laboratory or research team? What role does a PI or principal investigator play in this? According to Federico, it all comes down to curiosity.
Well, it's interesting. There is a risk we don't want our people. There is an optimum level of specialization. If you specialize too much and just interested in what you're doing, you become like a horse that has, looking like this. The horse cannot see left and right, because if they see left and right, they would immediately go berserk. Right? So we put this stuff, but scientists can't be like this. Now, at the same time, they cannot become jack of all trades, because today you really need strong some specialization in areas. So I always encourage students to read, for example, there are journals such as Science and Nature that not only publish the state-of-the-art articles, they also publish papers of more general interest that they look at science from a non-specialistic point of view. And so I tell them to go to seminars, right? But the most important thing, which I haven't said, I'm going to say now, look, you have to nourish curiosity. Curiosity is the driving force. If curiosity dies at some point, then you're really going to start to go backwards. You don't realize. And curiosity is something that it's not easy to maintain the same level of curiosity in your kind of late years. Maybe you are established, you're even famous, whatever. But that, I think it's important, maintaining a high level of curiosity. He was a great scientist, absolutely. He was one of the geniuses. He died in 96, Freeman Dyson. Freeman Dyson has written many books. He made his fame with quantum electrodynamics, could have won but then he started to pivot in so many directions. And before he died, I interviewed his daughter, and he said, this is amazing. This guy at 96 is still like a young kid. The drive, the curiosity to learn, right? It's very important, and it's not sufficiently nourished.
Thank you to Federico Capasso, a professor of applied physics at Harvard University. Be sure to subscribe for the latest episodes. You can message us at deepshow@deepvp.com. This episode has been brought to you by Deep Venture Partners. Get show notes, transcripts, helpful links, and more at deepvp.com.